Hi guys, welcome to lesson number 5 in the drawing series during the lockdown period. I'm sorry that this one is actually a bit late this week. I had a few technical issues and basically I did the picture and then I stopped the video of it. I want to say thanks to everyone who's been participating, and a few people have sent me photos of things that they've done, and it's really nice to know that some of you guys are doing stuff with your families, like with your kids or whatever. That must be a really nice experience, and it's really lovely to get the photos. This week I've got one that's on request, so we're going to be drawing some clouds. Thanks to Tink for sending me that idea, and I've done my best to try to show you how I would approach that, especially in the lockdown period when we don't have too many materials at hand. So this is the picture that I drew, and this is the source photograph just printed from a photo I found on the internet. You can use any picture of clouds you like. And what I've done primarily with this picture is basically I've drawn it just as a bunch of tones. So if you have a look at this tonal chart, this is something that I referred to the whole way through. Is that how I did it was I basically looked for dark tones, so I found them here. So that's almost black. This is very close to black, sort of dark tones, middle tones, light tones up in here and here, and then whites. That's very important to leave the whites. Now I'm going to walk you through the process of how to use those tones and how to get the shapes, because I did video of myself drawing this, but then kind of stuffed the video up. So I'll walk you through the process of how I did it, and then I'm going to ask you to pause, and then you can sort of keep up with that process. So to start out with, you basically need an eraser, and I've also used a little bit of blue tack or some kind of tack that is also can be used for erasing. I've used materials that I thought most people would have rather than fancy art materials, so just a normal HB pencil, no special brand, and normal drawing pad paper. It's nothing special about that either. Even just any old paper could do. So if you've got those materials, we can begin. So the first step, of course, is to draw a rectangle, what you think is roughly the same as the rectangle of the image, like so. The next thing is you're going to figure out a few key proportions. So one I can see here, it's pretty easy to see, is like this part here is about 1, 2, 3, about 1/3 across from the top. That's going to give you where that little bit of that cloud is there. So I might just put a little dot. This one here looks like it's about the middle from the top. Yeah, so put a little mark there. It's going to let me know where that is. You might want to figure out how far from here to here. I might say, well, that looks like it's about halfway to that little gap there. So put a mark here and there. So that's just figuring out where stuff goes. Once you're at that point, then what I've done is I've basically just drawn it, but just put in a few key shapes. But I've used a kind of a dotted line and not too heavy. Not really dotted, dot, but just a few little dashes here and there to show me where things are going to go when I come back to do the tones, because this is a drawing that doesn't have outlines really, because it has to all be really fuzzy. Clouds with outlines don't look very convincing. So maybe just have a go at that and pause the video. Okay, and if you've done that, then the next part is basically you're going to look for a bit of the drawing. Let's say we'll start off with this corner down here, this area. We can see in there it's mostly pretty much black and pretty dark tones. There's not much else in this area. So what we're going to do is, even if it's pretty dark, we'll still go with just making it just a little bit lighter than we see it. Simply for the reason that it's always easier to make things go a bit darker than it is to make them go lighter again. So I like to just draw it a little bit on the light side. And the main thing to remember while you're doing this, really key thing, is always remember to leave the whites. Have a good look where the whites are, and also to know in whatever area you're doing, just do one section at a time. Whatever area you're doing, just try to know what tones are in there. So in this area, you've just really got this dark and this grey, and probably a bunch of tones in between, and doesn't really get, or maybe a bit of mid-tone down as it fades out in this area here. So mid-tones down here, quickly coming dark. And then getting pretty dark. So now I've done mostly this part here. I could keep on darkening it up a little bit. But going into the next part, I'm going to have to look at a few different tones. So I've got this tone here and I've got this tone. I still have a little bit of darkish tone, but maybe nothing really compared to black. So, so going into the next section, just a little bit lighter. So you might notice that I'm moving my pencil in all different directions and I'm keeping it flat, not pointing it to the paper, but keeping it flat next to the paper and moving it in all different directions to reduce the amount of pencil marks that I'm getting. The next section, again, it's another, just a touch lighter. It's mostly these tones as well, but then also including some of those tones. So you can see gradually it's all getting lighter. So you'll notice this one's just a touch lighter, and the last one is really, really light, and it's going to be mostly white and a bit of this light tone here, and just a tiny little bit of middle tone up here. So a middle tone there, very light tone, and then white, and then sort of you can make gradations in between those ones. So if you've gotten this far, the next thing that you want to do is just start to use your bit of paper, just a torn off little bit of paper. Have a look at some of those really light tones first. So yeah, so just have a go at smudging where you see the lights. Hopefully you've left a fair bit of, well, not a fair bit, but you've left white where there should be white. But if you haven't, still now try to avoid smudging where it should be white. But if you haven't, it's okay, because we'll come back with an eraser in a minute. But when it comes to the smudging, we'll definitely start out with smudging the light bits first. Might do like little circular, not very big marks, just little circular ones, just to sort of blur it out in general. Just to kind of take the pencil scratchy marks away. And you're working on the light ones first, and just get a few, change the paper over every now and again, or when you're working on the light ones especially, because otherwise you just start to darken it. So just like lots of little circular marks. And so now it looks like more or less the same picture, but it's just a lot more blurry. Then you might want to start to work into the middle tones, follow the lines where it is. Don't try to blend anything too far away from where it already is. Just a little bit, just diffuse from what it already is. So it's the same picture, but just a little bit more blurry. And finally, start to work into the dark bits. Also, just lots of little circles, blurring them out, not changing the shapes or anything, and not going over the middle tones or the dark ones too much. So at this point, the picture's starting to look kind of all right. There's a few things that it's lacking. One is definition. So that's when you're bringing your eraser comes in. You don't need to worry about it too much at this stage, because you're still going to do a little bit more backwards and forwards with this, but keep just bringing out the light where there is light. You don't want too much white everywhere, because it's just going to not be very special. So it's a bit like having chili or a spice in food. Just have as much as you need, but not too little, not too much. If you overdo it, it's not special. Sometimes it's hard to get details, so that's where the blue tack comes in. You can kind of make it into a point and get a bit more detail. You could have an artist's kneadable eraser, or you could have a lot of fancy things like fancy pencils, all different grades, that would also help and make it better. But I'm doing this video assuming that if you're like me, you're in lockdown, can't go and get stuff from an art supply store, might just have a fairly ordinary HB pencil kicking around, or maybe some bits of paper here and there, and we're just going to make do with what we've got and see what we can do. Sometimes when you want to get a bit of detail as well, the same thing but with the darks. you can scrunch up a bit of paper, fold it over a few times and roll it up into like a little point like that, and then you can get a lot more detail in smudging and a lot more control there too. Now the picture's okay as it is, but what we're going to do now is we just come back to darkening the dark bits where we see that they need to be darkened, like here. Moving my pencil in lots of different directions. Now I might use the tip a little bit because I can push it into the paper a bit stronger. Moving the pencil a lot of different directions, so I'm going to need to come back and smudge that again to get rid of those marks. So that's how we're getting definition there. Lots of little strokes, different directions around the edges to try and get a nice bit of contrast, but by doing an edge of one tone against another, not by doing an outline. So building up the tones darker, getting that contrast where we need it to pop out a little bit, but just keeping an eye on what tone it really is according to the little tonal chart. That's really important. Always just checking what kind of tone is dark tone, mid tone, light tone. And as you go, same process. Find a bit of detail, smudge it out, lose a bit of detail. Redefine the bit of detail, smudge it out, and lose a bit of detail. So it's a finding, losing process. Find it, lose it, find it, lose it. But whatever you do, don't overdo it. Know when it's good and when to leave it. So that's basically the process that I went through before, and eventually lots of finding and losing, pulling out details again, smudging it out a little bit, and you'll get to the satisfactory amount of fuzziness and definition where you need it, contrast where you need it, bright brights, dark darks, and lots of tones in between, and fuzzy edges and some not sharp but defined edges. I hope that's been useful. I hope that satisfied your question, Tink, and yeah, thanks for joining us again this week, and hopefully see you again next week. Thanks.